Okay, welcome to another awesome video in the series of Miss Banker talks about world history. We're going to talk about, we talked about the Shang dynasty and the Zhou dynasty, and then in between the Zhou and then the next important dynasty, the Qin, there was this period here, you can do the math, of turmoil. So it's known as the Warring States period. And you'll see this as a common pattern throughout Chinese history, and frankly, until probably 1949. Here were these philosophies slash religion, ethical systems that were established that we've been talking about, you've been reading, to help with the turmoil. And ultimately, the king of the state of Qin will make himself the emperor. So the Qin dynasty, here you have the date, so not too long, but it sort of established some things that will be important to Chinese history. So it is the first empire, and the founder, Qin Shi the emperor, China, obviously it comes from Qin, so now you know. He did something clever, and the Japanese will do this as well, is periodically they will hold hostages in a sense, and the nobles will be forced to live in his capital. Thus, they won't be out causing trouble in their different states, so he keeps them close at hand. And then the one thing you need to remember about the Qin is legalism. And so you've read the reading, so you know that it's harsh. They were kind of anti-intellectual, especially Confucian text, and would burn the books. Because coming out of the Warring States, they saw a lot of chaos and perhaps had a darker view of humanity. So the achievements, they're the first dynasty to start building the Great Wall. However, not much of the wall built by the Qin exists. What we're looking at here is parts of the wall built by the Ming dynasty, which you will learn about towards the end of the year. So again, we've been seeing this common theme. A lot of empires and states start to standardize the weights and measures, axle carts, or I should say axles on the carts, so they could build roads the same size as carts could go down there easily. We see the development of written language, and of course, the most awesome thing about the Qin, in my opinion, is the terracotta soldiers, which we'll look at in a second. So how did they build the Great Wall? And so here are some tidbits here. Some estimate there might have been 1 million men who worked on the wall, and of course many of them were slaves. Hundreds of thousands will die in constructing the wall. And here is a nice picture. So you can see it stretching across the mountains there, the hills. And I speak from personal experience. It's pretty awesome. Also, if you click on these words, have a link to the History Channel, and there's kind of a cool 2-minute video that talks about the building of the wall and the history of the wall. It's quick and painless, so take a minute. All right, so here are the terracotta soldiers. So these were found by a farmer, I'm not sure when, in the 40s or the 50s. And so they continue to excavate this. So it's essentially Qin Shi Huangdi's burial site. And maybe I'll bring in my actual terracotta soldiers for you to look at in class. But he essentially made this little army to kind of show off his power. So we talked about pyramids and things that different rulers have built over the millennia to kind of show their importance, and Qin Shi Huangdi is no exception. So this essentially is the tomb, right? So you would walk up to this hill, and then the terracotta soldiers are all around this mound. And so they haven't excavated the mound yet because they believe, well, according to documents from that time period, there's supposed to be rivers of mercury. And in case you're wondering, I've walked up those stairs. And when they did some testing, I think they found some elements of mercury. So until they figure out how to do that safely, who knows what awesomeness is under here. But here's one of the pavilions where you can see where they've excavated the terracotta army. So again, this, can you imagine the scope of this? They haven't uncovered all of them, right? Just parts. So theoretically, the army surrounds his tomb here in this hill. And so here's some close-up pictures. So there's not only the soldiers, but even horses. So, I mean, who can even imagine how long this took? But the symbol of his power. Here's some close-ups, right? This is no joke. Okay, so the next important dynasty, and probably one of the most important dynasties in Chinese history, is the Han Dynasty. And so important, when you talk about ethnic Chinese, you call them Han Chinese. Okay, so let's talk about, here's your handy map, and here's Liu Bang, the head of the Han Dynasty. And so he's kind of interesting because he was actually a peasant who rose to the ranks of emperors. So when we talked about the dynastic cycle, remember, when one dynasty loses the mandate of heaven, and let's be honest, the Qin were pretty harsh rulers, peasants revolt, and in this case, Liu Bang was able to rise to the rank. And so these are the time of his reign. And so they kind of chilled out from the harsh laws of the Qin dynasty. So probably the most famous of the emperors of the Han is Wu Di, or Wu Ti, but remember, T is D. And he is known for expanding the Chinese territory, and probably one of the greatest Chinese emperors of all time. Helped, here's a cave painting here of Wu dispatching, I don't know, doing some cool stuff. Just thought it was fun. Here's an artistic rendition of him. And he was really responsible for spreading the influence of China beyond the borders of China. So something else that is developed under the Han, which will be an important feature for all Chinese dynasties, again, up until the 20th century, is a strong bureaucracy, right? All of our great empires and dynasties will have one. And this means that you govern by department, like we have in the United States. We have the State Department, the Treasury Department, right? The Justice Department, etc. So what was unique, I think, about the Han is this civil service exam. So maybe this is where standardized tests were born, right? is here. Here's some pictures of students taking these exams. And theoretically, everyone could take it, right? No matter what your social class is. But generally, of course, only the rich could have the time and money to spend on just the studying. But really, what you had to know is one subject. All right. So, remember this. It's important. Oh man, I messed up here. Ignore. So a couple of other things to keep in mind was this policy of assimilation. So when the Han started to expand its rule, it took in people who were not ethnically Chinese. So one thing they encouraged was assimilation, meaning having people become culturally Chinese. And so one way is to marry into the conquered people, right, to form a unified society. Another interesting emperor of the Han is Wang Mang, I'm going to say, and here are the dates. So from about 32 BCE to 9 CE, so we're crossing oops, I should probably change that to CE. The Han experienced a time of weak emperors, and then like the dynastic cycle, right? So chaos ensues, peasant revolts, and in 9 CE, ignore that B, Wang Mang, who was ruling as a regent, meaning the emperor wasn't a baby, and so he was kind of in charge until the emperor grew up, but he decided to just take over. So the Chinese were really suffering by the Huns, a nomadic group of people that were will be hassling, I think, our Roman friends as well eventually. And so he eventually was able to defeat them and establish order. So there's kind of a little break in the Han Dynasty. So to kind of overcome some of their troubles, he instituted a lot of these reforms, which I'll let you kind of read through here. But you can see some of them were tricky, especially things like redistributing the land. And so nature steps in here with a terrible flood. And so that his reforms were really not solving the problems. And so eventually the Han Dynasty will regain control. And so the break is, so before Wang Mang is the Western Han, and now after Wang Mang is the Eastern Han. And here's a picture from this time period. And the website I found it wanted to point out the invention of the collapsible umbrella, apparently. See, the Chinese, note to self, they invent everything cool. Okay, so what is the religion or ethical systems for the Han? Of course, again, I'm going to say it's not really a religion, but the Han will build up and reinstitute Confucianism. So the Qin had the legalism for a while, but that's going to fade out, and Confucianism will really revive and become the dominant ethical system, let's say, until the 20th century. And of course, this is the time when Buddhism starts to come into China. There's sort of these legends of how it came there. One legend is that it came from monks from India on a white horse, but brought in through the Silk Road. Side note, this is not Siddhartha Gautama. Everyone thinks this is Buddha, but it's not really Buddha. It's a Chinese Buddhist monk who was maybe a bodhisattva, right, who was enlightened but helped people. So just to educate everyone here. Okay, so the achievements of the Han, there's a lot of them. So like all dynasties who will come after the Qin, they will expand and build on the Great Wall. So again, they invent everything cool. Paper, so I'll let you take a minute and take down these things here. But Chinese silk, of course, is going to be the big prized commodity, and this is what the world will want, and that's why they kept it secret, how to make it. And what they need, of course, are horses, and these are some other things that the Chinese have, and this will become important in more modern history. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about when we get to Rome. We'll do a lot of Han-Roman comparisons between the two, and I'll warn you, if you take AP World, we talk a lot about it then too. And they serve as contemporaries, and it's through the Silk Road, kind of united in trade. So here's a handyman. Okay, ignore that. We'll talk about it tomorrow in class. So, again, take your time. Make sure you have that chart out while you watch this video. And if you have questions or if there's things that are confusing, bring them to class.